Are we live? So, hello there. Hi there, everybody. We've got a few minutes before we start. I've just been upstairs with my community having supper. They're going to watch a film, and I'm down here. So, welcome everyone. How many are here just now? Oh, the numbers are going up. That's good. So, let me know if you're new. Let me know if you're new to this series of this course that we're running, 7 Steps to Enlightenment. Let me know if you're new to this. I always want to say really good to see you, because of course I can't see you. What I'm doing is actually looking into a cam. What am I looking in? Some sort of camcorder thing, and I've got 2 guys from the Sakata community doing the tech, Max and Guillaume, and then Sanjay has come from my community. Just to be here. That's good. That's good. So yeah, make sure you've got everything you need. I'll start properly in a minute, but just to let you know that I'll talk for a bit, probably 20 minutes or so, a bit longer than we have been, before the course, and then we'll do a meditation, and then we'll have a tea break, and we'll just leave the stream going, and then I'll carry on the story and finish the story tonight. And then we'll finish with some more meditation. So that's just to give you a sense of where we are. You probably know that already, unless you're new. So welcome if you're new, particularly. Yeah. So here we are. I don't know what else to say now until people come live. You can see. You can see. We've decorated the shrine for Buddha Day tomorrow. Looks really beautiful. Really beautiful. We were going to decorate the courtyard because we thought, tomorrow we'd do a ritual that we might end in the courtyard, but I think it's going to either be very windy or rainy tomorrow. Apparently the temperature dropped, so we'll stay in here, and it just feels really right, doesn't it, just to really decorate the shrine, even though not many people can come here. The fact that we've decorated the shrine feels, for Buddha Day, for the most important Buddhist festival. It's often called thrice holy because traditionally it was the day that the Buddha was born, gained enlightenment, and died, at least in some traditions. So it's really the key moment in the whole of the Buddha story. Anyway, really nice to have that. So we'll go live in about a minute's time. Live, properly live. I know we're live now, but this is like me welcoming you at the start of a class. When I do the classes, I pad up and down in the courtyard outside the LBC. Someone tells me just my socks on. I really like to say hello to everyone as they come, if I can. I want to make that kind of connection with people, because what we're trying to invite you into on YouTube or in any other format is we're wanting to invite you into a culture of friendship, into a community of friends. I'm not some sort of professional teacher. I'm just part of a community of friends. So even this chatting to you before is just really me inviting you into a community of friends. And usually at the end of our classes, I always stand at the end by the door and say good night to people. And I'll do that later on as well, although I probably won't stand by the door. Okay, by my clock, it's 7 o'clock. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the London Buddhist Centre. Especially welcome if you've not tuned into our YouTube channel before. I hope that many of you, I don't know how many is here now. 71. That's all 71 of you. I hope that many of you have been following the 7 Steps to Enlightenment, the course that we've been running since Monday morning. We've got meditation in the morning and these longer evening classes following in the steps of the Buddha, following the Buddha's steps towards enlightenment. And we're going to be celebrating the enlightenment of the Buddha. We're going to be celebrating that tomorrow with a day retreat. So I hope you'll all come to that. So if you haven't signed up for the course, just do that on the link that Max will put in the chat. And what that means is you can then join the Zoom call tomorrow. So if you're new to meditation, if you're learning meditation, you can learn that tomorrow at 8:30 with Garavavati. And if you already are familiar with meditation, you can join a Zoom call with Jan of Archer in front of his shrine upstairs, and he'll teach you about meditation and take you a bit deeper into meditation. And then we've got events all day tomorrow, including short talks, rituals, another exploration of meditation at 10 o'clock. We've got a whole day retreat tomorrow. The first time we've managed to do a whole day's worth of retreat. So do tune in tomorrow. It'll go all the way from 8:30 all the way till the evening, when we'll finish with a Buddhist ritual to really mark the Enlightenment. And what we've been doing in these evening sessions, these longer evening sessions, just say a bit about the form of them for those of you who've just joined. I'll speak for about 20-25 minutes, then we'll meditate, and then we'll have a cup of tea, albeit in our own little worlds. We'll have a cup of tea, and then about a 10-minute break, and then I'll come back and complete the story, and we'll finish with another meditation. But yes, what we've been doing is, what I hope we've been doing throughout the whole week is firstly taking our own tiny, tiny steps towards enlightenment. Every time that we become more aware, every time we become more honest with ourselves and with other people, anytime we're more courageous, anytime we respond creatively rather than react habitually, without knowing it, and possibly without even knowing anything about Buddhism, we're taking our own tiny little baby step towards enlightenment. From a Buddhist point of view, you're only ever moving towards enlightenment, or you're moving away from it. And you're doing that every moment of your life, whether you know it or not. So I'm hoping that on this week, we've been helping you take little tiny baby steps in your meditation, following these stories every night. I hope we've been doing that. But also in the evenings, we've been telling the story of the Buddha's enlightenment, following his journey all the way from his birth. On Thursday night, we, particularly Jan of Archer, talked about the Enlightenment itself. And then Subhadramati last night was talking about the appearance of Brahma Sahampati, which is the imperative to teach, at best understood in profoundly symbolic terms, that the universe begs the Buddha to teach. Reality begs the Buddha to teach. And then I'm going to take us all the way up to the first time the Buddha does teach, what the Buddha first taught. And I want to do that. We want to do that partly because Thursday was a full moon. It was actually a flower moon, a super moon, a flower moon, apparently. And that's a traditional day in which you would celebrate the Buddha Day. So we wanted to talk about the Enlightenment then, but perhaps also, and perhaps even more profoundly, I think what we're doing this evening, even though it's not often traditionally taught like this, we're actually following the Buddha into the completion of the Enlightenment experience, which is a communication of enlightenment to other people, to other persons. And this follows a deep principle in human life, that something is not quite real, not quite solid until it's spoken, until it's shared. That when we share our experience, especially our valuable experience, we complete it in a way. We know it in a way that we didn't know it before. For me, I've been teaching now for about nearly 30 years. I love teaching the Dharma, at least. I've tried teaching a few other things. I wasn't so keen on that. I've tried teaching art, but that's another matter. And I did have one day when I taught poetry, and I thought never again. Anyway, I love teaching the Dharma, and one of the reasons I love it, one of the reasons is it's lovely to see people's first inspiration for the Dharma, particularly that beginner's mind, as they call it in Zen, which, as you get older in practicing the Dharma, it gets more and more imperative for you to keep in touch with. And even if you don't think in terms of beginner's mind, all of us need to keep in touch with a kind of innocence. We mustn't grow up too much. we must keep in touch with that kind of childlike innocence that we had. We mustn't leave that behind. But yeah, one of the reasons I love teaching is because by communicating something, I understand it more deeply as well. I go deeper into what it's not even what I know. I go deeper into the Dharma by trying to communicate it to others. So I think that as soon as we communicate, our own experience of something deepens. So what we're going to be doing tonight is following the story of the Buddha's enlightenment right until the moment where somebody else gets it. Yeah, perhaps we'll get to that after the tea break. Somebody else gets it. Somebody else knows it, sees it, knows what the Buddha is talking about. And in that moment, you could say the enlightenment is complete. Anyway, we'll come to that later on. So Subhadramati got us to the part of the story where Brahma Sahampati had appeared and begged the Buddha to teach the Dharma for the welfare of the world. I won't recap that. But as soon as that's happened, what the Buddha does is he thinks who he can teach. Yeah? And first of all, he thinks of the two teachers that taught him. Both of them taught him before he was enlightened. Both of them taught him a lot. Both of them were quite remarkable men by the sound of it. They, had very, very deep meditation experience, taught the Buddha, or the Buddha to be in that case. He learned it all and mastered it. And they either offered to share their sort of little spiritual group with him or offered the Buddha to be to lead it. And that, I think, is remarkable in itself, that they weren't sort of stuck in hierarchy. They weren't sort of saying, no, we're the teacher, you're the disciple, you need to stay the disciple. A really good teacher, the disciple overtakes him. Yeah, that's what you'd hope. And so they're remarkable teachers. And the Buddha, having decided to teach the Dharma, it's not quite really decided to teach the Dharma. That's all last night. So do look at it with Subhadramati. It's really, really wonderful how she explained it. But it's not really that the Buddha decided to teach the Dharma, shall I or not. It's more a dramatic playing out of the psychic moment of imperative. It's much more like a mother and a child crying, running up to them. Do you pick them up and comfort them or not? You can see that abstractly there's a choice, but really there's no choice. There is your child upset or hurt, and you scoop them up. Yeah, you don't feel any choice. And really that's much more like the Buddha. What was happening with the Buddha is that he saw a suffering world and but in that kind of deep sense that the mother sees the child suffering. They don't have to think they're suffering. What should I do? They just scoop them up. And the Buddha's relationship to us is like that. He sees a suffering world and scoops it up, wants to scoop it up and tell you the truth, tell you there's nothing to be frightened of. Perhaps he's trying to tell us that particularly, there's nothing to be frightened of. That thing called death that we're so haunted by, that casts such a shadow over human life, there's nothing to be frightened of. And he's sort of scooping us up to tell us that, yeah. But yeah, he thinks, but he does know, this is going to be very, very difficult to explain. I mean, that's putting it in very contemporary lingo, but the word gosh doesn't appear in the suttas. I don't know what the Sanskrit for gosh is, but he's really struck by, you can imagine it, can't you? Any deeper experience, you think, I don't know, I'm not going to be able to explain, no one's going to get this. We all have that, don't we, in our own moments where, especially if you've gone deeper in your life a bit, will people get this, or will they just think you're on some cloud cuckoo land, or you just got some bright idea? And sometimes, frankly, we have just got a bright idea. Anyway, he thinks about his teacher, and he realizes with his supernormal power that his teachers are dead. In fact, one of them had just died. He seems to know that. I used to feel rather skeptical about that sort of thing. I don't feel so skeptical about that now. I think it's quite possibly just literally what happened. He thought of them and somehow knew they were dead. And then he thinks, and all this is tediously put out in prose, isn't it? It's all probably just one moment. Stories are like that. They tell in sequence what happens in the moment. It's a bit like Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time is all time and every time. So he then thinks in the tedium of the story, but it probably all in the same moment, I could teach what's often called the 5 ascetics, but really they're just his friends. Yeah, I've got these 5 friends that I used to practice with intensely. Actually, I got it wrong. Then I thought the way to Buddhahood, as it were, was going to be through torturing myself. That was wrong. That was a mistake. I got that wrong. And when I said to my friends I got it wrong, they left me in disgust. Yeah. But I'm going to teach them. I could teach them. I know them. I'm friends with them. I know their minds. They know me. This thing that I've experienced, this thing, that's such a trivial way of putting it, this enlightenment, this door to the deathless that I've not just experienced, but I'm now wholly secured in, they might just understand it. They might just understand it. Yeah. And remember, these are friends who have left him in disgust. And they've left him in the disgust of prejudice, interestingly. As soon as the Buddha to be in that story takes food, he has what's called milk pudding, which is basically, as far as you can see, rice pudding. The sort of tapioca that you used to get in a tin when I was a child. He has rice pudding before he gets enlightenment, so that's something to bear in mind. As soon as he starts to eat again, his friends just say, "Oh, he's just gone back to a life of luxury." So it's interesting that those kind of caste prejudices, as we have class prejudices, all sorts of prejudices, just rise again. Prejudice is something that's very, very deep in human beings. It's too easy to blame people for it, actually, I think. It's too easy to blame people for anything. But it's interesting that they re-arise again. The Buddha decides to eat, and they think, "Oh, yeah, he's just a prince. He's just a spoiled rich boy. Let's just leave him." So they've walked out on him, but he's not walked out on them. Yeah, he remembers them, and he thinks, "I'm going to go and talk to them. I'll go and talk to them." So this is really striking that the Buddha decides to teach. Decide being the wrong word. The Buddha is like a mother scooping up the child who's suffering, and knows that it can help with that suffering. Yeah. And the first person he thinks of is his teachers, and then after that, his friends, basically. We have these 5 ascetics, which I think rather disguises that fact, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I think sometimes for the Buddhist tradition. Really what he's talking about is, I've got these friends, and I know them, and they know me, and I can talk to them. We're friends, yeah? Friendship is I was saying just this morning, actually, to a class I was teaching, that friendship is like the Petri dish. It's not a great metaphor, but never mind. A Petri dish on which you grow the Dharma, on which all truths and value are communicated. It's through friendship, through a culture of friendship, that you'll learn anything. You can learn things from books, and you can learn things from watching this YouTube clip. It's not a clip, is it? Anyway, whatever it is, a YouTube thingy. But really, you need friends who you can tell the truth to, who will tell the truth to you, friends who will join you in a quest to the truth, capital T, the truth of enlightenment. Yeah. So it's really striking to me that he thinks about his friends. Now, this is very unusual. Traditionally, what people did when they experienced some great breakthrough is they would sit there and wait for people to come to them. I don't know much about him, but you remember that story about the Buddha boy who was just meditating and people would come to him. Yeah? So the tradition at the time was, if you experience something, a great rishi or a great meditator, people would hear about you and they'd come to you and ask you for teachings. So it's very striking that he doesn't do that. The Buddha doesn't do that. The Buddha doesn't wait for people to come to him. So it's interesting what he doesn't do. He doesn't just sit there and think, I am the Buddha, guys, gather around, get a hold of this. He doesn't do anything remotely like that. Sorry about the colloquialism. He doesn't wait for people to come to him. Yeah, but nor does he go to the local town and preach. He doesn't go to the marketplace and bang a drum and preach the good news or preach the word. He doesn't do that either. So that's striking, isn't it? He doesn't just wait and expect people to come to him and say, gosh, what's happened to you. He doesn't do that. He doesn't go and preach the Dharma. He doesn't go and stand on a box and tell people stuff and tell them what they need to do. What he does is he gets up and he walks with bare feet to meet his friends. Yeah, that's what he sort of knows where they are. It's called clairaudience or ordinance, where you seem to know where people were. Bhante Sangharakshita, my teacher and the founder of the Triratna Buddhist order, he talks about clairaudience and clairvoyance and has experiences of it. I think it's not as uncommon as we think. I think even deep communications, particularly in friendship, might contain an element of telepathy without us realizing it. Sometimes we can feel so deeply in tune with each other that communication seems to go further than merely the greater and greater subtleties of speech and intonation and facial expression into something like a mind-to-mind contact. I think that's really quite likely, and it's possibly much more of a player in our life than we realize, because anyway, we're incredibly sensitive to each other, aren't we? We human beings are incredibly attuned to each other. So even sometimes on these videos that I've been doing, I don't know whether it's my fancy, but I can sometimes feel whether it's coming across or not to you, even though I know someone here is in India, so I don't know where else you are, all over the world sometimes. Sometimes it's almost like you can feel that kind of atmosphere, like I sometimes feel in the room of the London Buddhist Centre. Sometimes the atmosphere here in this room is the atmosphere of the Dharma. And when that atmosphere is there, all you do as a so-called teacher, which is really just a friend, let's not put any grander word on it than that. Sometimes when that atmosphere is there, all you need to do is steer people deeper and deeper into that atmosphere. That's all you need to do. Sometimes I see my sense it even online. Yeah, so he decides to go and talk to his friends. He knows where they are. He has this sort of clairaudience, ordinance. He walks to meet them at the Squirrel Park. It is Isipatana. I've never been to India, so I have it's sort of India for me is a world of my imagination. It's not a world of reality. I've never been there. But I always imagine him walking, a solitary figure in rags. And remember, he wouldn't be anything like this golden figure behind us. He'd be unshaven, probably have cut all of his hair, but he'd be wearing effectively rags. He'd be probably filthy. A young man, just walking on his own. But something remarkable about him. Everybody who saw him, there are recounts of people meeting the Buddha or just seeing the Buddha, and immediately there are all these recounts of him walking like a leopard or an elephant and having this gaze. He's supposed to have this elephant gaze, in as much as every time he talked to you, he'd never just sort of talk to you, at a side or over his shoulder. He's always turned completely to face you and look at you and fully take you in. I've had experiences of that with Bhante Sangharakshita, the founder. I remember once him doing that to me, just suddenly turned to look at me. And I don't know whether you've ever experienced this in your life where somebody really gives you all of their attention. And it was like almost unbearable for a second. I felt like saying, please don't do that. I can't. To have someone give me all of their attention and have so much of themselves behind that attention. So often we give each other just a modicum of our attention whilst we're thinking of our phone in our pocket, We give people tuppence worth of our attention. But the Buddha would give you this elephant gaze. So there he is walking across India, walking like a leopard or a lion, with this incredible bearing. And he meets on that journey, he meets a holy man, another wandering holy man. And the holy man sees the Buddha to be, no, sees not the Buddha to be the Buddha, walking towards him in this barefooted figure, walking towards him in the dust paths of India, in the heat. And as soon as he sees him, he just thinks there's something remarkable about this man. He's got something. And again, I think I've seen this in my own experience to a very small degree, that mental states of mind show on us, don't they? They show even across the camera. We're highly attuned to states of mind. And sometimes people sort of glow, and they really do. I remember Subhuti, at my own public ordination, I remember looking and thinking, gosh, he's like an angel. He's sort of glowing. I remember seeing another friend of mine, and a teacher of mine who since died, meditating, and he just looked like an angel. He was just incredible to look at. He wasn't a handsome man at all, but in this meditation, he was. I remember literally having a double take, and this remarkable kind of sight. You can sort of see something, yeah. So I can well imagine seeing the Buddha. You could see it like miles off. You could see something. And as he moves towards him, this holy man stops him and says, "There's something about your bearing that is really remarkable. Who are you? Who's your teacher? Where do you come from?" And the Buddha says, "I'm the Buddha. I'm the Buddha. I am enlightened. I'm fully and perfectly enlightened. I am the Buddha." And the holy man says, "Oh, okay." So are you? I got the story slightly wrong. He says actually before, "Are you a god?" And the Buddha says, "No, I'm not a god." Which is striking, isn't it? I'm not a god. No, I'm not God, and I'm not a god. Are you a god? No, I'm not a god. Are you an angel? The Buddhist word for it, the Sanskrit word for it is deva, which means a being of light. It's basically the same concept of as an angel. It's interesting itself that human beings throughout time have experienced beings of light. We're all like, oh yeah, we're so too sophisticated for that now, but we've done it. So he asks him, "Are you an angel?" And the Buddha says, "No, I'm not an angel." Then he says, "Are you a human being?" And the Buddha says, "No, I'm not a human being." He says, "I'm a Buddha. I'm a Buddha." And what is so striking about that is what he's saying is that you haven't got a category for me. There isn't a category. I'm having to now create one called Buddha. That's what I am. Yeah. It means that he is a new species unto himself. He's born human. When he says he's not a human being, he doesn't mean, I don't know, it doesn't mean that he's suddenly sort of transformed into a being of light. He's not, because he's saying he's not an angel or a god. He's saying, I'm not a human being in any way that you could understand it. Yeah. I'm born human being. I'm flesh and blood like you. But apart from that, if you were to sort of see my mind, you'd actually be terrified. You wouldn't understand it. Yeah. I'm not a human being in any way you can imagine. Yeah. I am a Buddha. And as Bhante Sangharakshita says, that he's basically said, I'm a new species unto myself. Yeah. I'm the first of a new species. I'll come back to that later. So you can imagine this meeting. Are you a god? Are you an angel? Are you a human being? No. I'm a Buddha, a fully enlightened one, a perfectly enlightened one. And the holy man says, yeah, it may be so. It may be so, yeah. And then he walks off. He just goes, yeah, I can believe that, yeah. I could sort of see that something's going on, and yeah, it could be a Buddha. Yeah, that sounds good. And then walks off, which is really incredible, isn't it? That you can meet the Buddha, actually be introduced to him, and not get it. It's very striking that you can, and even be a holy man, just think, yeah, okay, great. Thumb emoji, clap emoji, smile emoji, halo emoji. That's what we do now, wouldn't we? Guess what? Met the Buddha on the road, halo emoji. What did you ask him? But it just shows you that even the Buddha can't actually scoop you up as a child, like my metaphor of a mother and a child. You can't do that. The Buddha can't pick you up and save you and tell you the truth. You have to listen, and you have to be open to him. And if you're not, you could be taught by the very Buddha himself, and it'll make no difference. Yeah, it'll make no difference. You need to be receptive. And in a certain sense, this evening, the whole of our session this evening, the whole of our story hinges on that single matter of receptivity. Because you can be surrounded by philosophers and scientists and artists and poets and thinkers and saints, and you can not learn a thing. And all of us actually now are surrounded by them. I've just been reading this wonderful novel by Sebastian Barry, the Irish novelist, who actually I think is wonderful. And the novel follows First World War, the Second World War, the Vietnam War, and on from there, this terrible litany of war, this unbearably moving book. And yet the character is, at the end of the novel, is saying, I really appreciate my life. I feel gratitude to all these people. And to read it, even to read a novel, and this is a very good novel, well, you need to be open to it. You need to be receptive. To read philosophy, to read poetry, golly, just to go for a walk, you need to be receptive. If you're not receptive, you won't grow. Now, being receptive is a risk, and I'll come to that in the second half, but you need to be receptive. Otherwise, there's no growing up. You'll just be, if you're not receptive, you're just in this little sort of rubber ball of me, in this awful little room, highly decorated room that we call myself. But yes, if you're not receptive, even meeting the Buddha on the road won't change anything. The Buddha can't help you, if you're not receptive. So what we'll do in just a moment, we'll meditate. And what I'd like to do this evening is to really see if we can explore this apparently simple matter of being receptive. It's something that we need to keep coming back to again and again. And it's got its dangers, being receptive. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit, not too much, but a little bit in the second half of the class, because this whole question of receptivity is the final question of this story that we've been telling on these 7 steps to enlightenment. We'll come back to that. But first of all, we really need to cultivate receptivity, without which we will not learn. And if we don't learn, we won't grow. And if we don't grow, we're not really fulfilling our humanity. Our humanity, being human, means growing. And if we're not growing, we're kind of dying. And that's such a waste. That's the saddest thing, is the fact that so many of us are so fortunate. We have such fortunate lives. I feel very, very fortunate. I'm living in a community upstairs. We've all been well, remarkably. 2 of the guys from downstairs have been ill, but no one's been terribly ill. I know people who have been ill, and of course, I know people who've died. So I feel very, very fortunate. But the tragedy of life is so many fortunate people not using that good fortune to for the best, to really use that good fortune by being receptive, by learning and therefore growing. That would be a great use of our good fortune, wouldn't it? if we really grow in generosity, grow in wisdom, grow in kindness, grow in courage, grow in honesty, and try and share that as much as possible. That would be a really good use of our good fortune. Yeah. So anyway, lecture over. Let's set ourselves up to meditate. Yeah, great. So setting yourself up so you can sit comfortably on your chair. If you've got, I don't know, a tight clothes around your waist, you might want to loosen the top button. And then closing your eyes. And then as soon as you've closed your eyes, engaging with your body. So feeling the weight of your body on the chair. Really giving your weight to the chair. And just imagine your whole body resting down, calming down. Calming your body, calming your mind. Sometimes all you need to do is just imagine yourself calming down. So we've had this, at least in London, this lovely sunny day, and it's just like the sunny day becoming twilight, the whole sense of nature calming down for the night. So your whole body, your mind, your willpower, all of that is just calming down, quietening down. Calming your body, calming your mind. And then again, softening your eyes, softening your brow. And then see if you can let go of your shoulders. And you might just imagine your shoulders releasing, relaxing. And then see if you can soften your belly. We're often gripping on belly, and we don't need to do that. So in this way, our whole system is quieting down, calming down. So all we're going to do today is cultivate receptivity, just opening ourselves to our experience. So first of all, just tuning into sounds around you. You don't even need to try to listen to them. They're just there in your mind. So just being receptive to sound. You're not trying to grasp the sound or follow it, or you don't need to name it. Just notice it. You're just open to it. You can just let it be what it is. And then without stopping being receptive to sound, there it is, the sounds. You can't even say if they're out there or in here. They're just there. The sounds themselves don't have labels on them, outside or inside. Just sound. So keeping in touch without keeping open to sound. Letting sound be as it is. See if you can include the sensations of your body, whatever sensations you feel. So just as you can let sound be what it is, sound of cars in the outside, your flatmate making supper, whatever it is. You can also just let physical sensations be what they are. You don't need to like them or not like them. They're just there in your experience, like sounds are there. So see if you can be open to them, receptive to them. So there's the sounds around you. You don't need to label them. You don't need to decide that they're in here or out there. You can just be open to the sound. See if you can be open to sounds near and far. Well, of course, near and far aren't in our experience of them. They're just words. And in the same way that you can be open to sound, you can be open to your body. So sensations in the body might feel pleasant or unpleasant, or very neutral. But we can treat them just like we treat sounds. We can just let them be there. Be open to them. Be receptive to them. And of course, as we're open to the sensations of the body, letting them be there, whatever they are, we can be open to the sensations of the breath. So open to the sensations of breathing, receptive to the sensations of breathing. Receptive to the whole body around the breath. And receptive to sound around the body. Letting it just be there. As if we were listening to the rain or to the sound of wind. Just opening your senses to sound. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes and coming out of the meditation. Okay, good. Okay, so we'll just have a 10-minute or so, just 10 minutes, just a little bit less than 10 minutes break, so you can get yourself a cup of tea or stretch your legs and go to the loo. And then I'll carry on the story after the tea break. We'll have a little break in here as well, but we'll keep the live stream running. I forgot to say that in the second half, I'll carry on the story, as I said, but there'll also be time for questions. So I've said quite a bit already, so you might have questions. So even now, you can start putting the questions in the chat. But there will be time to questions. And for me, I find that one of the loveliest things about this teaching is that there is a chance for us to interact. But let's have a little break just now, and I'll call back again in a few minutes' time. Press one button. Yeah, so we're coming back from tea break. I've got my cup of peppermint tea. I hope you've got something. So just a moment for people to gather again, and I'm going to carry on telling the rest of the story. In a way, finishing the story for now, for this time of telling it. These stories never end. I've been telling this story for 30 years probably, and it's been told for 2,500 years. And it'll never end, this story. It's a great story. Okay, so hopefully everybody is back by now. I don't know how many we've got now. 143, that's great. So yeah, welcome again. Welcome back, everybody. Especially welcome if anyone's new. Normally at this time at the tea break, we've all got our peppermint tea outside normally, and I'm normally standing on a chair because the only way to get attention, because often the Buddhist center is so full. One of the sadnesses of now is seeing the Buddhist center closed for so long. And I'd be announcing, particularly those of you who come regularly to the Buddhist center, and some of you I know do, you know full well that I'd be announcing going on retreat. I'd be saying, what I want to really concentrate on is going on retreat. People have said to me that eventually they thought, okay, I'll go on retreat. So I can't announce to go on retreat, but I can really recommend that you be on retreat. So you can be on retreat tomorrow from 8:30 in the morning until, 9 o'clock at night. We've got events pretty much all the way through the day. So there's a Buddha Day playlist on our YouTube site. So have a look at our YouTube page. And if you haven't registered for this 7 Steps to Enlightenment course, still worth registering, because then you can join either Garavavati or Yanavatra in the morning at 8:30 to either learn or go into meditation more deeply. But especially I want to recommend that you register for our home retreat. We've got a home retreat, the first home retreat that we've run. We've been having to cancel retreats at our retreat center, Vidrasana. Such a shame. It's the most beautiful place. Many of you I know have been there, but many of you won't have been there. It's such a beautiful place, and I'm actually really sorry not to be going there. I should be going on the men's intensive retreat pretty soon, the day after my birthday, on the 4th of June, but not anymore. So we really wanted to try to create as much of a retreat as possible online. So we're going to start on Sunday, the 17th of May, with the usual, here's how you be on retreat. We'll have breakout groups to talk about how you're going to be on retreat. We'll have somebody doing a dedication ceremony to dedicate ourselves to the retreat. We'll have meditation at 7 a.m. in the morning, led by Subhadramati. And then if you're new to meditation, you can learn meditation with Garavavati. If you're regular to meditation, you can join me at 8 o'clock in the morning. We're changing the time slightly so that I can be with you for a full hour, 8 in the morning till 9. And again, I'll give you some meditation guidance, and we'll have a longer meditation. There'll be time for questions and a little bit more meditation to finish, 8 until 9. And then mid-morning, 10 o'clock, I think, there'll be more meditation with breakout groups. And then again in the evening, these 2-hour slots. And we'll be exploring things like the meaning of mindfulness, the meaning of meditation, the meaning of love, the meaning of wisdom. Yeah. So I really recommend you sign up for that retreat. We had 1,000 people sign up for this course, the 7 Steps to Enlightenment course. So those of you who've been really valuing this course, and I know lots of you have, there's been so much appreciation. It's been very moving, the appreciation that's been expressed. Do share our ads for it on your social media pages and so on. Let's see if we can get the word out. It would be wonderful if 2,000 of us, I say, were on retreat. And of course, if you possibly can, I'd take time off so that you can be on the whole retreat, just as you would normally. That's what I'd really recommend if you can. If you can't do that, do as much of the retreat as you can. So you might still be able to, even if you've got full-time work, you could still go to the 7 o'clock meditation, still come to my 8 o'clock meditation, still do the evenings. That'd be quite substantial as well, yeah. So that's the 17th to the 24th. I think Max had just posted the link in the chat. So do come to that if you can. So let's follow the story of the Buddha walking across India. And he gets to Isipatana, and the 5 ascetics, as they're called that because they're particularly practicing ascetic practices, and they were very much in vogue at the time. They were the sort of things you did if you wanted to be what we would call spiritual, if you wanted to be religious, if you wanted to break through to the truth. You did these sometimes torturous ascetic practices. Kind of difficult for us to imagine that now. Our culture is so utterly different. But that's why they're called the 5 ascetics often. Really, as I said earlier, it's best to think of them just as 5 friends that the Buddha had. Yeah. They'd lived together, they're just like friends. They'd lived together, meditated together, been on retreat together. I'm sure they must have argued and discussed and got to know each other and the idiosyncrasies of each other and so on. So they knew each other as friends in that way that you never know people outside of that. In my own small way, I'm trying to live out a tiny bit of that in my own life. I live in a community upstairs. There's 10 of us living together. And we're trying to live together, not as teachers and the taught, but as friends, as a group of friends who are gradually getting to know each other more and more deeply so that we can be kind to each other, we can challenge each other, we know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And in that culture, you can communicate. You can communicate like you can never in any other culture. We're trying to create, not just in the community, but in the Buddhist center, a culture of friendship. Be that as it may, the Buddha walks towards his friends, and they see him coming. They're there in the squirrel park of Isipatana, and they see him coming. And it's really interesting, their first response. They see him coming towards them, on the road, walking towards them with this incredible gait that everybody talks about, this incredible posture and beauty that the Buddha had, which is what you're trying to evoke in this shrine, is the Buddha's beauty, the beauty of truth, the beauty of wisdom, the beauty of compassion. It's an aesthetic thing. But you see this man walking towards you through the dust, through the heat haze, and they saw him, and they said, "Here comes Siddhartha. Here he is, that spoilt boy, that the man who renounced the holy life, renounced asceticism, and went back to luxury." So they obviously haven't dropped that. They're still on that tune. I do find that very interesting, that what re-arises is caste prejudice. And of course, prejudice, we're very aware of prejudice going one way, but prejudice can go the other way. People can feel very prejudiced about middle-class people, for instance. I think that is a sort of prejudice I've had at times. I remember when I come from the lower middle classes, and I used to find meeting what I would call properly middle-class people, I'd had this sort of aversive, prejudicial response. It's quite common for people to feel that, and they don't feel bad about that. People do feel bad about, and quite rightly, about having prejudice about, I don't know, black people or gay people or whatever. But we've all got our own prejudices. None of us are free of it. And even these remarkable men were clearly not entirely free of it. It's part of being human, having prejudice. You can get over it. You shouldn't justify it, but one should seek to understand it and seek to help. Yeah. Anyway, they see him coming, and they have that prejudicial response. Tell you what, here he is. Here's it's a sort of little rich boy scenario. Here's a little rich boy. It was all right for him. He's a guy who had rice pudding. We're the tough spiritual guys. Yeah. This isn't uncommon in spiritual life. We're the ones who are really doing it. This guy has kind of gone back to just enjoying himself. It's quite common, that attitude. And they say, actually, look, let's ignore him. Yeah, it's quite striking. They say, let's ignore him. Let's not go to him. Let's just ignore him. We're doing our stuff. He can come if he wants to, but let's just ignore him. And what's still more striking is that as he moves towards them, as he steps towards them, as he walks through the haze and the dust of India towards them, they find themselves incapable of ignoring him. They find that they welcome him. So one gets, it's always very traditionally in these very kind of set kind of forms, but really basically somebody gets him somewhere to sit, someone gets him some water to drink, someone says, do you want any food? They do all those things that you would do to somebody that you want to welcome. You want to make them comfortable, you want to make them feel welcome. And they do that against their own instincts. They've decided amongst themselves, and you see how they've become a bit of a group, a bit of an in-group, that with that self-righteousness that any group has. They've become a bit of a group, and they think we don't want him involved in it, but they can't help but break out of that when they see him, and they get him a chair, and they get him water, and they get him food, and they welcome him, and they even say to him, you look different. They try to talk to him as if he's Siddhartha again. Still, what's happened? What's been going on? And the Buddha says, "I'm not Siddhartha anymore. I'm the Buddha. I'm not just your friend anymore. I'm the Buddha now. I'm a different creature." And he says, "The doors of the deathless have been opened. The doors of the deathless have been opened." On our thumbnail for tonight, it says what the Buddha first taught. And you could say that's what the Buddha first taught. The doors of the deathless have been opened. I have found, the Buddha saying, I found a way. I found the solution to the great problem of life. And of course, the great problem of life is the fact of death. The fact of death and the uncertainty of when that will happen. The two things that we know is we will die and we don't know when. And that is this massive, the great problem for human beings. And the Buddha is saying, I found a solution. Not a half solution, not a fantasy, not some kind of heaven or hell or some kind of holy solution that's not really real. I have found the solution. The doors to the deathless have been opened. I am the Buddha. It is effectively saying, I have conquered death. Now that doesn't obviously mean I'm going to live forever, because the Buddha didn't live forever. The Buddha lived until he was about 83 or something. And you see, when he was an old man, had all the issues of an old man. There are sutras in which he says, my body is really uncomfortable. I feel like it describes himself as being like an old cart, tied together with belts and straps and string, something that once was a kind of nice, pristine cart, but it's gradually falling apart. And that's what you feel like, I know, as you get older. My mother's very elderly, and she feels that very acutely. She feels like an old cart that's uncomfortable. So it's not that the Buddha was free of any of those things, but he was completely free in his mind. The death, the real matter of death is losing me, is the loss of me, and he's seen through me at enlightenment. That's the whole point, that he doesn't attach to me or I or mine. So there is nothing to lose for the Buddha at death. So from that point of view, the doors to the deathless have been opened. But you see, in this real way, not in I'm now become immortal, or now I've gone to heaven, or I live on in my ancestors, none of that nonsense. He's saying, I've seen through egotism. I've seen through self. I've seen that's an illusion in the first place, and that there is nothing to lose at death. Yes, there'll be pain, physical pain, and so on, but there's nothing to lose. There's nothing I had in the first place, and there's nothing to lose. So he says the doors of the deathless have been opened. And striking, because in the sutras that come down to it, all of it gets codified and systematized. And they say usually he taught the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, and so on. I find it personally very, very doubtful that the Buddha would have come up with all of those systematic thoughts by then. He's come straight, fresh from the Enlightenment experience himself. He is now a new creature in the world, a wholly new species unto himself. And I think what you need to imagine is him, how am I going to get this across to these guys? He hasn't got any Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, this, that. So if whatever the Buddha first taught is a communication that we just can't fathom. A new species in the world trying to say, do you see what I've discovered? Just see what I've discovered here. Do you see that you can imagine it. He wouldn't be stumbling for words, but he wouldn't have these pre-cooked teachings that have come down to us. And they're very useful, don't get me wrong. But we need to imagine that it can't have been like that. He must have been just trying to find ways. How can I get this across to you? It's a bit like, I know there are some people who've been watching from India. And it's a bit like trying to describe snow to someone who's never experienced snow. Some of our Dharma brothers in India who've never experienced snow. It would be like trying to describe snow to them. You'd have to, how would you do it? If you've never experienced it. I remember some Indian order members, part of the Triratna order, came to stay with us, and we had this huge snowfall, and they all rushed out and just stood in the park, glorying in snow. Suddenly they experienced it. You can see it on YouTube and so on now and everything, but they'd never experienced it. So if you can imagine somebody who'd experienced snow trying to communicate that to somebody who never experienced anything remotely like it. So what do you do? What do you say? You have to find things in your experience that chime with, that are a bit like what I'm trying to say. So you might say, it's like Shrikand coming down from the sky. Or you might say, it's like the inside of a freezer box. The Buddha couldn't have said that. But, you have to try and find something, don't you, in someone's experience. You say, well, it's a bit like that. Because you've not experienced enlightenment, so I can't tell you what it is. What have you experienced, and what can I say is it's a bit like? I remember once giving a talk, and I used the word guinea pig, and somebody didn't know what a guinea pig was. And I remember trying to describe what a guinea pig was. Actually, it was just they were German, they didn't know the English word for it. But for a moment, I had this vertiginous sense of, if you don't know, how on earth do I describe a guinea pig if you've never seen one? Yeah. So if that's true of a guinea pig and snow, you can imagine how true it is for enlightenment itself. How are you going to get that across? So the Buddha's not going to be coming in with eightfold paths and fourfold ways and 37 Bodhipaksha dharmas. He's going to be coming in with, here's what, and try say this, try it that way, try it that way. And it's interesting because we don't have the picture, but you have to imagine that there is these 6 friends together, except for now we have an enlightened friend, the friend of the world, and the Buddha is called the friend of the world. We have the friend of the world with these 5 friends. And we tend to think of, when you see pictures, it's always a Buddha rather gorgeously dressed in these lovely robes with beautifully shaved head, with these identical looking disciples with robes on the one row. It all looks terribly cleaned up. It's, actually they're probably filthy, dirty young men that we would probably want to avoid on the street. And probably they're talking a lot, and they're probably quite impassioned, and it won't be all just the Buddha talking. You can imagine the Buddha goes off and one of them says, did you get anything from this? You can imagine one of them thinking, no. He said that. I didn't understand that at all, actually. No idea. Well, what do you think? You can imagine them talking together. It's not just going to be the Buddha talking to them. You can imagine them talking together and saying, actually, I didn't understand a word of that. And then somebody saying, well, actually, I got that bit. Oh, I got that bit. Yeah. You can imagine that. I often say that basically what you've got here is the first ever Buddhist retreat. Basically what you've got here is the archetypal Buddhist retreat. Instead of having a golden figure of the Buddha as a friend to the world, and somebody like me teaching in his stead, which is terribly embarrassing, really. And but there you go. In the absence of the Buddha, you've actually got on this first retreat the Buddha himself talking to his disciples. So I'm going to break for question in a minute, but I'll just finish the story because I want to draw out. There's just three elements here that are very important, I think, in this communication. The doors of the deathless have been opened. This great matter of trying to describe something that you've not experienced to somebody, something that you've experienced to people who haven't experienced it. The whole of what we call Buddhism is an attempt to do that, to describe what reality is like to those, all of us, myself very much included, who don't know what reality is like. How am I going to get that? How is the Buddha going to get that across? That's what Buddhism really is. It's nothing more technical than that. It's somebody who's lived in snow and rolled it up and thrown it and made snowballs out of it and felt it fall on their cheek, trying to talk to somebody who's never felt any of that, who doesn't know what you're talking about. Yeah? But there are three principles to this. The first principle is the principle of hierarchy. People are very uneasy nowadays about hierarchy, but what's interesting here is that it is all led by the Buddha. The Buddha's Dharma is not co-created. They're not all saying, okay, so let's have, how many truths should we have? 1 or 2 or 3 or 4? The Buddha is saying, I know the truth. You need to learn it. Yeah? Now, it's the archetype of that. It's the most extreme version of hierarchy where somebody is all truth and wisdom and others are not. It's rarely like that in life, very, very rarely, in fact, almost never. But nevertheless, we need to believe that some people have more experience than ourselves, and we need to be receptive to that. If we're not, we won't learn, we won't grow. Now, as I said in the first half, being receptive to people more experienced also involves risk. But for heaven's sake, your life involves a risk. If you don't take a risk, that's a huge risk. One of the great risks that you'll take if you're not careful is the risk of not taking risks. If you don't take risks, you won't grow. You won't discover your potential. In this watched over world where anything you might do is on YouTube or being reported on Facebook or so on, it's going to be more and more difficult for human beings to take risks because before you know it, you're being misunderstood on Facebook. Very, very important to take risks. I want to say sensible risks, but not too sensible, So being open to people with more experience than you is a risk. They might not be as experienced as they look. It's very easy to look very spiritual. It's quite easy to do. It's quite easy to seduce people into making you think that you're spiritual. It's a cheap trick, but it's quite easy to do. It's quite easy to seduce yourself into thinking that you're more than you are. And for people who are open to that, it's quite easy for them to abdicate their sense of responsibility, to not be able to disagree, and so on, to be gullible. Actually, I notice people who are cynical are often also very gullible, in my experience. So there's definite risks. I don't want to go on and on about them, but there are definite risks. But the risk of not being receptive is spiritually much more significant. Yeah, you will make mistakes with being receptive to people. I have. I remember. I won't go on about that, but I've made mistakes in being receptive to people that I look up to. But I couldn't have grown to the degree I have without being receptive to my teachers, to my friends. I hope when I die, I'll be able to say, hand on heart, that I have been receptive to my friends in the Dharma. So that's the first principle, the principle of hierarchy. The Buddha's Dharma is not co-created. The second principle, I think, is the principle of receptivity, that you need to be open to it. You need to want to get it. You need to believe that someone's getting at something, that there might be something worthwhile here. You can't be just sitting sort of back and listening critically and kind of nitpickingly to find holes in your argument. You won't get it like that. friends of mine upstairs, we're working in this lockdown. We've been working our way through Wagner's operas. We've just been watching the Meister singers, Joan of Archer, David and I. David's had this discovery of Wagner through these times, but he's just open to it. What's been striking, he's only a young guy, and he's never listened to opera before listening to Wagner, but he's just willing to let, there are lots of things you could say about Wagner, including very critical things, but he's just willing to think, well, let me just see if there's anything here. Let me be really open to it. Unless you're really open to it, you'll never learn from it. You can't learn in that kind of cool, detached, sophisticated, clever clogsy kind of way. Yeah. So you need to be receptive. That's the second principle. And the third principle is the principle of friendship that I've already mentioned. So you've got the Buddha's Dharma is not co-created. It's coming from outside of ordinary minds. It's not part of your ordinary everyday experience. It goes beyond that. It transcends that. That's why we have a figure of gold. It's trying to evoke a truth, a reality that is outside of your everyday consciousnness, like way outside to you. That's a metaphor as well, but because it's also inside, but it's very much hidden inside. So you need to be receptive to that. So something from outside you, as it were, metaphorically, can't be literally outside you. Let's not trip over words. Then you need this principle of receptivity, which I've talked about, so that you can learn that truth and be open to it because it's not in your experience directly. And then you need that in the context of friends. Friends who can knock it about, friends who can agree and disagree, friends who can think about it, friends who can follow you on that journey. Yeah? Those are the three principles, I think, that come out of this first great teaching, what the Buddha first taught. And just to finish the story, as they're talking together like this, suddenly one of the disciples gets it. And it's interesting that it's one of them. Buddhism is always, in a certain sense, a whispered teaching. The Buddha is whispering to you. As he whispered to me when I first came into this shrine room when I was 25. I cycled here from my squat in Brixton. As soon as I saw this figure, and as soon as I was taught the Dharma, I seemed to hear the Dharma. I've never really had to correct my first impression of the Dharma, that it was what life was for, that it was the purpose of life. Yeah, I've never had to correct that first impulse on my first ever night at the Buddhist Center. In a way, that was a touch of wisdom, completely unearned by me, a touch of wisdom that I've never had to reappraise. I got it straight away. I couldn't live it out, and I'm still trying to live it out, and I'm still failing and succeeding to a tiny degree and failing again. And you're probably doing the same. But so it's always one-to-one. One person gets it. And this time there's a disciple called Kundanya, and he gets it. And in the moment of getting it, he too becomes enlightened. It's not just he thinks, oh, I see what you mean. Actually, it's a bit like he does think, oh, I see what you mean. It's that instinct we all have where you suddenly clicks, when you think, and then you go, oh, I get you. I get it. You suddenly get it. It's very physical. It's very palpable, isn't it? When you get it, I get it. I get it. That experience that we have on so many different levels can be right at the deepest level where you get reality. You get what the Buddha's saying. In that moment, you're enlightened straight away. Yeah. The Buddha knows that Kundanya knows, that he's understood. And he says, Kundanya knows. Kundanya knows. And that is the completion of enlightenment. Do you see that only when somebody else becomes enlightened, in other words, where enlightenment is a flame that can catch and light 1,000, 1,000,000, 10 million candles, only once one flame has lit another flame, and therefore can keep on lighting flames through 2,500 years of history, right to this evening on this Saturday night, the night before Buddha Day. Only then is the enlightenment complete. Otherwise, it's just like somebody winning the lottery and never spending any of the money. They just keep it all for themselves. What's the good of that? As soon as it goes out, as soon as another candle is lit, then the enlightenment is complete, as it were, complete, to use that metaphor. So, yeah, the Buddha says, Kadanya knows. And that according to tradition, the sky fills with angels, fills with devas. And they're all just celebrating and shouting, Kadanya knows, Kadanya knows. And they're in ranks, like the ancient hierarchy of angels that you see in Christian iconography. There's literally ranks and ranks of them above each other. And one rank shouts to the rank above, that shouts to the rank above, all the way up to the top of heaven. And what this is getting at is clearly saying, and it's not just a pitch for this, it's truthful in its deep sense, that this is a universal moment, a moment of cosmic significance. You know? This is the fulfillment of enlightenment. So I've spoken a bit longer than I'd meant to. So let's see if there's any questions before we have a brief meditation to finish.
Yes, so Penny's asked a simple question. Is receptivity the same as faith?
Oh, that's a really good question. Simple question, but it's a good question. Gosh, I've never put those two words together. My first instinct is I don't know. They feel somewhat different. Faith is supposed to have these three elements: intuition, reason, and experience. So faith, Shraddha is the word, which is sometimes translated as placing your heart upon, is based on an intuitive sense of something. That intuitive sense is then reasoned out. You reason about it. You can see that it doesn't, it conforms with reason. It's not fantastical. It's not some mad idea. And then you, on the basis of intuition and reason, you then practice Buddhism and you find that it works. You get experience. So faith traditionally has those three elements of intuition, reason, and experience. And then do you see how experience leads to more intuitions of faith, which makes you have to think about it more deeply again, which leads to new, deeper experiences of it. It's a kind of little spiral all of its own. I think perhaps you could say that receptivity is more fundamental than that. Even to look at a painting, you need to be receptive. To get anything from a walk in the park, you need to be receptive. To have friendship, you need to be receptive. I think, I'll need to think about it more actually, but you could say, I think, that receptivity is more kind of fundamental in a certain sort of way. It's the ground out of which Shraddha can arise. That might be the best way of putting it. The ground out of which faith can arise. Without receptivity, there can be no faith, I don't think, unless it crashes in, and sometimes it does with people. Yeah.
Someone's asked if you can repeat the questions because they can't quite.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Anne has said, within the hierarchy of experience, how would you deal with or hold disappointment in a teacher? It can be quite painful.
Yes, so disappointment in a teacher can be quite painful. That's very true. I think it's something to face very, very early on, that you will feel disappointed in with your teachers. You probably at times feel disappointed in yourself. And I bet you other people will feel disappointed in you. We're all of us human, only too human. But yes, it can feel quite painful. I think there's a trajectory of disappointment. When I first came along here to this center, I thought that order members were, Bhante Sangharakshita once described me as almost impossibly naive. Having read one of my books, he said it seemed that I was almost impossibly naive. Which I don't know how I feel about that. It's got a good side. But I thought that, order members, to use the tradition I'm in, were like they'd be like really, really close to enlightenment, something absurd. And of course, that's not the truth. That's not the case. Order members, and myself included, have good days and bad days, good weeks and bad weeks, good periods. And all of us have got particular strengths and weaknesses, particular characters. But I think disappointment is something we need to learn to live with and need to learn a new understanding of. It's only too easy to put someone on a pedestal or to smash them onto the ground. We don't seem to have in the West at least, a very healthy way of looking up to people without idolizing them in that silly way. If you idolize anyone, including your parents, that's not in your interest. But if you denigrate people and, you know how sometimes people talk about their parents in such a horrible, denigrating way, such a sort of like, oh, it's horrible. You just sort of, that's wrong as well. Because, you are your parents, whether you like it or not. So if you denigrate your parents, you are denigrating yourself. So what you want is, what we need, and I think it's going to take a time for many of us to experience this, is a healthy looking up to people without ever losing your sense of rational criticism. You mustn't lose your critical faculty, but you need to be at the same time open to greater experience than your own. But if you lose your critical faculty, then you are silly. You've been silly. And teachers, people who are teaching, people having this privilege to sit in front wearing a white case and so on, our responsibility is to live up to what we've dedicated our lives to, and to apologize and confess when we don't live up to it, and not to hide that. One of the dangers about teaching, and I think this is particularly a danger of teaching online, is anyone can look good when they're teaching. I live upstairs with Sandra, and we're there with the rest of my community brushing our teeth in this very small bathroom we all crowd into. You're not teaching them. You get to know people in a much more all-rounded way. In some Buddhist traditions, you never get to know the teacher in that way. And I don't think that's healthy for teachers. It's not healthy to start to think of yourself as a teacher. You're almost bound to be deluding yourself, and then before you know it, you're deluding other people. But yeah, there is a trajectory of disappointment. It is painful, and it's a growing up thing. It's a bit like children who think their father or their mother knows everything. I remember Alex, my partner's oldest daughter, I remember saying, look, that's a cormorant. And she said to me, I know that. Which at that age, she said, anytime I told her anything, she said, I know that. And then she said, Maitreyabandhu, do you know everything? And I said, no, nobody knows everything. But there is a time, isn't there, as a child, where you really think parents, your teacher, you remember your junior school teacher, know everything. And you have to grow up. Yeah, you have to grow up. And it's just the same in spiritual life.
So Harvey.
Hi there, Harvey. Hello, nice to see you again.
He's asked, how do I cultivate receptivity in everyday life?
Well, Harvey, you were talking earlier on, I think, is it Tall Harvey that we were talking to earlier? Tall Harvey, as we call him. You're not managing to busk at the moment. So you were saying that you were trying to spend more time doing nothing. And you were saying how difficult that was. I hope you don't mind me telling everybody online. But that's a really good way of cultivating receptivity, is do nothing. Just stop. Don't even meditate. Sit in a chair with a view outside or whatever. Get yourself a cup of tea and don't get up. See if you can do that for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And this morning you were saying you found that surprisingly difficult to do, because you hit this kind of boredom, don't you? And you hit that kind of that uneasiness. Now, of course, it's our uneasiness with our thumb, isn't it? We just want to get our phone out. Even I do, and do something with your thumb on your phone. Look at your emails, check your Instagram, whatever it is. There's this. Our phones have meant that we never ever just do nothing, because there's always something sort of pulling us into this sort of vortex of the screen. So yeah, I think a really good thing to do is just that's a classic way of cultivating receptivity, is to just do nothing. Another way, actually, just whilst I'm messing around with this, is go to a gallery once they're open and go and stand in front of a painting for 20 minutes and just look at it. Just be receptive to it. That's a way of cultivating receptivity. Or read a novel. I've been reading Sebastian Barry's novels, and it's just lovely. You get the same kind of hump that you have to get over with a novel, don't you? Where you start it and you think, a bit long, and gosh, how long does this chapter go on for? And then you look at your phone, no, you have to create, and then gradually you just get receptive to it and it starts to open up to you. But yeah, start with doing nothing. That's the toughest way of doing it. But yeah, there's much more to say, but probably that'll do for now.
Yeah, another question on teachers is Kuba has said, any advice for navigating through fakes in search of guidance?
Yes. Interesting. Your question is any advice for navigating your way through fakes in search of guidance? It's funny, we've got this word fake, and I think it's not as straightforward as it looks. You can be a fake actually to yourself. There are some poets, I think, for instance, I won't name names, but who I think are a bit fake in the sense that they have found a way of talking that sounds poetical and rather grand. But I feel it's a bit fake, and but I don't think they're trying to be fake. I think they're being sort of fake to themselves. In other words, you can get ideas about yourself, especially if you've had strong experiences, spiritual experiences, meditation experiences. You can start to get quite strong. You can get sort of ideas about yourself. Or if I'm teaching, sometimes I'm teaching here at the center, and sometimes something comes through me, and I can feel the room lighting up. And before you know it, if you're not careful, you start thinking, I'm really something. I've got this whole room, and everyone's saying, Maitreyabandhu, that was fantastic. Actually, it doesn't happen that often, but anyway, if they do, you could see how you can sort of fake yourself into thinking you're really quite special here. So it's not necessarily that people are trying to fake you. I think that's probably unusual. I'm sure it exists, but it's more that you get seduced by your own rhetoric. You get seduced by people looking up to you. People looking at you with adoring faces. You start to think, oh, that's me. It's very, very dangerous. That, again, why friendship's so important, because friends will just go, stop that. A good friend will just get a pin and burst your bubble. They won't let you do that. In our community, we tease each other a lot. It's not to do with fakery. It's just to do with, that's what friends do. You're on a level, aren't you, with friends? But yes, anyone who makes claims for themselves, I would delete immediately, frankly. So if someone says, I'm enlightened, or I've got insight, or delete. Next, there's lots of stuff on YouTube. Delete, unsubscribe, job done. As soon as they make any kind of claims, delete, unsubscribe, block this, they are not going to help you. Yeah? Any making claims, it's such bad manners, if nothing else. And it adds nothing to the person. If anyone does it to me, it makes me very, very suspicious of them. So, for instance, I'm a great lover of poetry. One of the great poets of the 20th century is, without doubt, Philip Larkin. I think of Larkin and Elizabeth Bishop as the great examples. What they both had is, riddled with doubt about their own work. Larkin writes a poem like Whitsun Wedding, sends it to the TLS to publish, and says, "Hope it'll do." They don't. I am a great poet, and here's one of my great poems. If Larkin had said it was a great poet, it would make you doubt him. And actually, it doesn't matter what he says about it. Let's have a look at the poem. Yeah. So it's exactly the same with people. Their behavior is what you need to watch. The Buddha said you need to watch their behavior over a long period of time, through difficult times and good times, gradually get to know them as a friend. Then you can start to make some reasonable judgment of their human evolution. But yeah, any claims, delete. Yeah. Any other questions before we finish? We have one more before we finish.
Yeah, Pippa said, do you think enlightenment is instant like that, or just something that clicks, or is it a continuation, a phase of growth, things slowly falling into place?
So yeah, you got this question, and this I think I don't think there's actually any way of answering this question. Is enlightenment instant, or is it gradual? It's the question, really. Actually, I was thinking about this. You could say this of childbirth. Is it instant or gradual? The experience is like unbelievable. When the girls were born, when I remember going to see Ria and when just the day she was born, and Alex the day she was born. She wasn't there one day, and then the next day, someone is passing me this miracle into my arms, and I'm holding this baby who looks just like Gary. It's absolutely a miracle. It's like in the moment, but of course I know that it's really been, well, all the biology, and yet, so it's both, isn't it? It's both continual, it's both gradual and instant. It's the same you could say of the flower. Is a flower instantaneous miracle, or is it right there in the root? Well, it's kind of both. And in one hand, you can say, well, it's in the root, but that gets it wrong because it's not in the root, is it? If you dig up the root, there isn't the flower, there isn't the color, there isn't the fragrance, there isn't the beauty in the root. But there isn't the flower without the root. So we've got these models. Is it gradual, or is it instantaneous? Both of those models tell you something about reality, but what they also tell you is they don't fit reality. Because even in those very simple things of a child being born, a flower, never mind a Buddha, a gradual model speaks for one element of it, an instantaneous model speaks for another. Neither of them quite get reality. Reality can't fit into any kind of models. Look, we're running out of time. So in fact, I've spoken far too long. So I want to finish with a brief meditation at least, just to finish. Really, really good questions. I'm sorry I haven't answered more. So one doesn't quite know until one sits in front of the camera what one's going to say and how it will go and how the vibe. It's also that the guys in the room are very receptive, so they're bringing things out of me that I didn't know I had. So let's finish with a brief meditation. But before that, just to make, again, this appeal for donations. So, we're really wanting to run everything on a donation basis. We really want you to, just want to give. That's what the Buddha did. That's what the Buddhist tradition wants to do and should be doing, is just give. But of course, we're in real economic realities, just like you are. Centers closed. Normally we've got people with bowls asking for donations at the start. Class like this, we'd have, I don't know, we might have £200 worth of donations, £300 worth of donations, something like that. So of course, all of that has stopped. I mean, a lot more money has stopped than that. We've had to close our businesses down. Lama's Pajamas, our what do they call, charity shop, has made a lot of money for the centre, but we've closed that down. So we're really going to be hit by a very, very large shortfall, very, very large. So yeah, we really need you to give. If you can't give, that's fine. It's completely free. But if you can give, do. There's a link. If you look at that more info thing below this video, there's a link to our Just Giving page. If you can give a monthly donation, that would be fantastic. If not, just give a one-off donation just for tonight. That would be wonderful as well. Okay, let's finish though. Let's come back to meditation. Quite a lot of words tonight, so let's come back to ourselves. Let's come back to meditation. And what I thought we'd do, just to finish, is just sit quietly. Once again, closing our eyes. Coming back into our experience. Being receptive to our experience. How are we doing just now? You don't need to think about that. You just kind of open yourself to it. And then I just thought we'd finish by just wishing everyone well. So many people are suffering just now. And they're suffering in lots of different ways. They might be suffering because of the COVID virus. They might be suffering in their mind or in their body. And of course, some of those people are dying or have already died.